Greetings and welcome to this short video presentation on how we go about creating and managing objects in Active Directory. So I'm currently logged on to my virtual install of Server 2012, and I have my Microsoft Management Console created from a previous lab sitting on my desktop. We're going to begin this lab by just double clicking this. Now once the Microsoft Management Console opens up, I want to go ahead and expand Active Directory users and computers. I want to go ahead and expand the name of my domain. Now I want to right click and I'm going to select from the context menu on the name of my domain, New, and go to Organizational Unit. I want to name this new organizational unit Employees, and I have checked the box to protect the container from accidental deletion. I'm going to say OK to that. Now I want to go ahead and right click on my new organizational unit called Employees. Go to Properties, and in the description I'm going to type Non-Administrative Users. We can now go ahead and say Apply and say OK. I'm now going to create an additional 5 organizational units, starting with desktops, groups, admins, servers, and laptops. I'm now going to go in and apply a description for each one of my new organizational units, starting with desktops. So I right click, open up Properties, and in the description field I'm going to type in desktop computers. Once I have that done, I'm just going to say OK. And now for the groups containers, I'm going to type in non-administrative groups. For the admins, I'm going to type in for the description administrative groups. And for the servers container, for the description, I'll type in servers. And for the laptops, I'll type in laptop computers for the description. Now that we have our organizational units created, we can start adding our users. And we begin with the Employees container. We right click, we're going to go to New, and we're going to select User. Now for each user, I'm going to use the naming convention for their logon name, using their first initial and their last name. So my first user is named Dan Holmes. So I'm going to type in Dan's name. For the logon name, I'm just going to use his first initial and his last name. I'm going to say Next. Now the user must change password at next logon is already checked for me, and I'm going to type in a default password for all of my new users that they are going to have to log on to the network for the first time, but they will be required to change their password to something that is unique for them. Now once I have the password typed in, I'm just going to click on Next. And this comes up with the results of what we just created. And I can either go back and make changes if I need to, or I can just say Finish. Now we look inside the Employees organizational unit or container, and we see that we have a user named Dan Holm. And now I'm going to create an additional 5 more users, and I will add each one of these to the Employees container as well. Now with each new user that I create, I'll just say Next. And again, I'm going to type in the default password that I use so that users can log on to the domain for the first time, but they will be required to change their password at first logon. So now we can see that inside of my Employees container or organizational unit, we have a number of users. And now we're going to move on to our desktops OU, and we're going to add in some computers. Now here's my caveat about adding computers to the domain. Normally we don't do it. These are dynamically added when the user logs on or we add the computer to the domain. DNS and DHCP work together to add the computer automatically up inside of the default computers container for the network. So we normally don't do this unless we have some type of security need and we want to only allow secure dynamic updates. So we're going to start by adding a server to the servers container. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to go ahead and select new, and now I'm going to select computer. So the server's name will be SVR1 and the computer name for pre-Windows 2000 access such as NetBIOS will be SVR1. And notice that the following user or groups can join the computer to the domain. By default it is the domain admins. Say OK to that. So this is what we normally refer to as pre-staging. But again, we normally don't do this unless there's a security need and we just don't want to use or to allow dynamic updates on our network. We can right click on our new server and go to properties and get some information that pertains to it. Now once the actual device does join the domain, you can go up and you can find the operating system, all the good stuff that you want to know about, its location. For instance, if it's located up in the server room on the 3rd floor, or who's managing the server, and if there's a dial-in allowed for this particular server. These are all the properties. I'm now going to add 2 more servers to the server container, starting with EX1 and SharePoint 01. After each one, I'm just going to say OK. Do one more here. And again, I say OK. Okay, now we're going to create some computers for the desktop container. Then I'll create 2 laptops for the laptop container. And after each one, I'll just say OK. And we can go up inside of the desktop. And there's my new computer pre-staged. And now we will pre-stage my 2 laptops. So far we've created some containers, we've created some users, and we've created some computers, and we've pre-staged all of this up inside of our Active Directory. We're now going to move on to creating some groups. Now the first group that we want to create is called Finance. So I'm going to right click on the groups container, I'm going to go to New, and I'm going to go to Group. And I'm going to go ahead and type in Finance. This is going to be a global group, and the type will be Security. I'm going to say OK to that. Now the great thing about groups is that I can apply the security settings, the permissions, and the shares, the printers to the group. And anybody I add to the group automatically picks up those security settings, those permissions, the ACL, the access, the printer access, all that goes and it follows the user with the group. I'm now going to create 3 additional groups, one called Finance Managers, one called Sales, and one called APP Office 2016. Again, we're going to leave the group scope as global and the group type as security for each one of these. I'm now going to add 2 more groups to the admins container. One will be called Help Desk and the other one will be called Windows. Okay, so now we're going to start adding users to our groups. Now you'll notice that I have two groups up inside of my admins folder, and if I right click on the group, and I have this add to group option, but it may not work because it doesn't have the right objects to search for. So what I have to do is close this out, right click on the group, go to properties, select members, and now click the add button. And now I can type in the name of the individual I want to look for, and in this case it's Robert, and I can do a check and we find him, and I can go ahead and say OK. We're now going to add a computer to the APP Office 2016 group. We begin by just right clicking on the name of the group. We're going to go to properties and we're going to go to members, and we're now going to add our desktop 01. I'm going to go ahead and type in that name. And I'm going to do a check. Now notice that it came back and it said it could not be found. You have to open up object types, and now you're going to have to select the box where it says computers. Say OK, say OK, and let's do another check, and it has been found. I'm going to say OK, say apply, say OK, and that computer has been added to the App Office 2016. So when we're managing a very large domain, and we have hundreds, sometimes thousands of users and computers, we can use the Find feature up inside of Active Directory to locate objects. I just right click on the name of my domain, go to Find. In this case, I'm just going to type in Barb and see what pops up here. And I'll do a Find, and down here we find Barbara Bush. This last portion of the lab deals with building a query, and we're just going to go up here to where it says Save Queries. We're going to right click and we're going to go to New. We're going to select Query. In the name box, I'm going to type in all users. Now I'm going to go down to where it says Define Query. Click on that, and underneath the Users tab, underneath where it says Name, I'm going to pull down the window and I'm going to select Has a Value. I'm now going to say OK. I'm now going to say OK again. And there is the results of my query. Now to help define my query, I'm going to change the number of columns that I currently have in the viewing pane. And I do this by going up to View, and I go to Add Remove Columns. In the list of available columns, I'm going to select last name. I'm going to click Add. And in the displayed columns, I'm going to click Type, and I'm going to select Remove. I'm now going to say OK. I can now adjust these columns to move them around and change the view of how things look here. I can just push this over here like this, the name or the last name, and that makes it the second column. So I now have name, last name, and the description, and three nice columns for my view. That pretty much concludes this short video presentation on how we go about adding and managing objects up inside of our Active Directory, and I'll see you in my next short video tutorial.